Sponsored by Rabbi Shlomi and Mirla Greenwald. This is a Sicha from Likutei Sichos, Chelek Beis, Parshas Tazria, Sicha Alef. And the topic of the Sicha is that in this week's Parsha we learn about Tzaras, and the Gemara in Bava Metzia discusses a case of Tzaras where there is a suffix regarding the Tzaras. And there are 4 parts in the Sicha. The Rebbe will, number 1, ask 2 questions on the Gemara. Number 2, discuss and explain a teaching from Likutei on our Parsha. Number 3, based on this, answer the 2 questions. And number 4, present the connection between the end and the beginning of our Parsha. The Mishnah at the end of the 4th parak in Mesechus Nagayim teaches regarding Tzaras, so in Baheris Kadma L'Seir Lavan, if the Baheris, which is the white discoloration in a person's skin, comes before the white hairs that grew in it, Tameh, then the person is Tameh with Tzaras. V'im Seir Lavan Kadam LaBaheris, and if the white hair grew in this area before the Baheris came there, then Tar, the person is Tar. V'im Safik, and if there is a doubt, we don't know which one came first, so we have an argument. The Tanakama says Tameh, the person is Tameh. Rabbi Yeshua Kia, and Rabbi Yeshua Kia. And the Gemara Masechtas Nazir explains, my Kia, what does Kia mean? It means Kia v'tar, that the person is tar. So the Tanakama says that in such a case the person is tamei, and Rabbi Yeshua says that the person is tar. And the Gemara over there, Masechtas Nazir, explains that the reason of Rabbi Yeshua that he rules that the person is tar is because the pasuk says at the very, very end of our parsha, it says about tzaras letare oy letamei, to make the person tar or to make the person tamei. And it says over there letare first, and so we learn that if there's a question whether the person is tamei or tahar, we rule that he is tahar. And the Gemara Masechtas Bava Metzia teaches, it says over there a similar argument. It says kamifagli b'mesifta derekia. They had an argument in the mesifta derekia, in the heavenly academy. So in Baheris kademis l'seir lavan, if the Baheris comes before the white hair, Tamei, the person is Tamei. V'im seir lavan kedem la Baheris, and if the white hair comes before the Baheris, Tar, he is Tar, just like in Mesechus Nagayim. Safik, what if there is a doubt? We don't know which one came first. So over here we also have an argument. HaKadosh Baruch Hu Eimer Tahar. HaKadosh Baruch Hu says that the person is Tahar. The Kula Mesifta Dirikia Amri Tamei, and the whole Mesifta Dirikia says that the person is Tamei. Va'amri, and they said, Ma Neicha, who will decide whether the person is Tahar or Tamei? Noichach Rabbi Bar Nachmani. Rabbi Bar Nachmani will decide. The Amar Rabbi Bar Nachmani, because Rabbi Bar Nachmani said, Ani Yochid b'Negayim, Ani Yochid ba'Alois. I am singular when it comes to matters of Negayim, of Tzaras, and I am singular when it comes to matters of Alois. So Shadru Shlicha Basrei Chulu, they sent a messenger after him to see what he says, and the Gemara continues with the story there, Chulu, and his response was, Amar, he said, Tahar, Tahar. The person is Tahar. And there are 2 questions over here. Number 1, how is it possible that the Mesifta Derekia should argue with the Kadosh Baruch Hu? And number 2, what's the logic to say that Rabbi Bar Nachmani, he should be the one to be machriya, to decide between them? So we're going to begin by explaining that it's known that when it comes to being machriya between 2 opposing opinions, that it doesn't mean that the machriya agrees with one of the opinions. And one way of understanding that is because then you don't really get anywhere. You simply just have more saying one opinion, another individual that joins one of the opinions. But rather the meaning is that it's a third opinion that tolerates and includes in it both opinions. And that's the reason why the halacha follows the machriya, because it's not saying that opinion number 1 is correct or that opinion number 2 is correct. It actually tolerates and includes in itself both opinions. In terms of the ruling, it'll pick one ruling, but not for the same reason that the first or second opinion ruled that way, but rather for a different reason, because his reason includes in it both opinions. And this is similar to what we find regarding Chesed, Gvura, and Tiferes, where Tiferes includes and is machriya between Chesed and Gvura, that the way it works, as is explained somewhat at length in the Sicha, is that Tiferes doesn't agree necessarily fully with chesed, but rather chesed says that everybody is deserving of receiving goodness. And gvura is very exacting, and in front of gvura, nobody is deserving of receiving goodness. And what Tiferet says is that it agrees with gvura that nobody is deserving. But even though they're not deserving, but there's rachmanis, there's compassion. So it's not saying, like chesed, that everyone is deserving. It actually is agreeing in that regard with gvura that nobody is deserving. But it's saying that nevertheless the action should be one of giving because of compassion, because of rachmanis on those that are involved over here. And so from here it's understood that in the hachra of Rabbi Bar Nachmani between HaKadosh Baruch Hu and the Mesivta Derakia, that when Rabbi Bar Nachmani said tahar tahar, it isn't the same tahar as that of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It's a different tahar. It's a Torah that includes in it both the opinion of HaKadosh Baruch Hu and the opinion of the Mesivta Derakia. It's just that in terms of the final ruling, it ends up technically being Torah just like the Torah of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. But inherently, it's a third and completely different opinion that includes in itself both the opinions of HaKadosh Baruch Hu and of the Mesivta Derakia. And the reason he was able to do this, it says over there in the Gemara, is because he said, Ani yachad b'negoyim, Ani yachad b'halos. So over here we're just explaining what it is that Rabbi Bar Nachmani was doing, but now we have to explain how did he have this special power. We know it's associated with being yachad b'negoyim, whatever that means, but we don't have an understanding of what gave him that special quality that he's going to be the one to determine and decide between HaKadosh Baruch Hu and the Mesivta Derakia. So this will be understood by first explaining what's taught in Likutei on our Parsha, where it talks about HaKadosh Baruch Hu and the Mesivta Derakia. And it's explained over there that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is the Elokus that's higher than the worlds, which is the level of Sovev Kolamin. And as we can see in the name HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that Kadosh means that it's Kadosh Amuvdal, it's separate, it's higher than the worlds. And Mesivta Derakia is the Elokus that's connected to the worlds, which is the level of Memali Kolamin, which has a Sichos and is connected to the worlds. And that's why by a suffix, whether there is tumah or not, then HaKadosh Baruch Hu says tahar, and the Mesivta Derakia says tami. Because the idea of tumah comes from yeshus, and that's why the tyra of the tumah comes from tefillah, which is the letters of bittul. So since tumah is connected to yeshus, so the tyra of the tumah is going to come through the opposite of yeshus, which is bittul, and that's why it's done through tefillah, which has the same letters as bittul, except that the hey is switched for a vav. And therefore, when there is a suffix, whether to say that a person is tahar or tami, so then the Mesivta Derakia says tami, since the level of a lakus that's connected to the worlds of Memali Kolamin, of Mesivta Derakia, it gives room to yeshus, because it's connected to the worlds and it recognizes the worlds, it gives place for the worlds. And even the bittul from this level of Elokus, when it accomplishes the bittul, is only bittul yesh. And so when there's a doubt that the person became tami, then that itself, that there's a question whether this tamei indicates a problem, and we're going to say that it's tamei, at least we'll say that it's tamei misafik. However, HaKadosh Baruch Hu says tahar, because the level of Elokus that's higher than the worlds doesn't give place for yeshus, and the bittul on this level is bittul mitzias. It's total and complete bittul, and therefore, as long as it's not clear that the person is tamei, we say that he is tahar, since the starting point is one of complete and absolute bittul. And so unless there's certainty that the person is tamei, that there's yeshus, we say that there is none, and it's the level of complete bittul. Now it's known that also the level of the air of that Sovev Kol Almin, also that level has a connection to the worlds, because we say that it's Sovev the Almin. So even though it's above the worlds and the worlds are totally bottom mitzias relative to that level, but the worlds exist to it, and that's why it's described as Sovev Kol Almin. And that's the reason that this level is called HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which, as we said, it means that it's separate from the worlds. Because from the very fact that we need to say that it's separate from the worlds, and that's how we define it, indicates that we're discussing a level of Elokus that has a connection to the worlds. Because if it's entirely higher than the worlds, then it doesn't make sense to define it by it being separate from the worlds. So the very name of a Kadosh Baruch Hu, which indicates that it's higher than the worlds and it's separate from the worlds, also indicates that it has some sort of a connection to the worlds, and therefore it's defined by being higher than the restrictions that are in the worlds, and it's completely above them. And from this it's understood that also the bittul of the worlds from this level, since the worlds exist on this level as well, so even though it's bittul b'metzias, it doesn't completely negate the worlds, but rather that the worlds are there and that they are totally bittul, but they're not entirely negated. However, higher than this bittul is the bittul that comes from atzmusay umuhusay yizbarach, from the very essence of Hashem, that isn't begeder almin klal. It has no connection to the worlds whatsoever, and it's not described not as memali kalamin, certainly not memali kalamin, and even not seviv kalamin, which means that we're defining it by being higher than the worlds, because it has no connection to the worlds whatsoever, and it's not defined in that way at all. And that's why by atzmusay umuhusay yizbarach we don't say echad, because the word echad doesn't reflect the level of negating the worlds, because when you say echad, it means there could be a sheni. There's a second one. And also echad means that there is a ches, which represents the seven heavens and the earth, and there is a dalid, there are four directions, and it's just that they are bottled to the Alef. But by atzmusay muhusay yizbarach, because it's that level is not begeder alman kalal, it has no connection to the worlds whatsoever, we can't say and we can't define it with the name echad, but rather by atzmusay muhusay yizbarach we say yachad. Yachid, which reflects that that there's nothing on that level, nothing exists outside of him. According to all of this, we can now answer our two questions, starting off by saying that according to this, we can explain what was different about Rabbi Bar Nachmani saying Tar that's different than what a Kadosh Baruch Hu said Tar. Like we explained, that when there's a Shlishi HaMachriya, when there's a third one that's Machriya, it's not that he agrees with one of the opinions, but rather he's saying something entirely new that includes both opinions. In the ruling, it may sound like one, but really his opinion is inherently and fundamentally an entirely new opinion that includes in it both opinions. And now we're going to explain how that is, and in the process we'll also answer how it's possible that the Mesifta Derikia should argue with a Kadosh Baruch Hu, as well as what's the logic to say that Rabbi Bar Nachmani should be machriya between them because he is Yachid bin Goyim. So compared to the level of a Kadosh Baruch Hu, that the bittul is one of Echad, which we said echad is meaning that that there are worlds, and it's just that they are batal. There is a ches, there is a dalet. It's just that they are batal to the Alef. So there is place for the worlds and for the way they understand and experience things. When it comes to the level of a Kadosh Baruch Hu, even when it's revealed and it shines, there is still place for the worlds. And so therefore, the Mesifta Derikia, whose level of one is one of understanding and grasping things, it's not one of total Gili Alikus. It's one where there is Havana and Hasaga, there is the existence of the person. So, therefore, they said Tameh, even though they knew that a Kadosh Baruch Hu said Tar, even though there was a revelation from a Kadosh Baruch Hu to them, because the revelation of a Kadosh Baruch Hu that's shown in them was in a way of makif, but it wasn't grasped in their understanding, which remained in existence. So, the level of Mesifta Derikia is one where there is Havana, Hasaga, meaning that there is the reality of the worlds and what's in front of them. And over there, even when there is a revelation of a Kadosh Baruch Hu, since, like we said before, even though the level of a Kadosh Baruch Hu is one of Bittul Mitzias, not one of Havana and Hasaga, one completely above Havana and Hasaga, but still it gives place for the worlds, which means that when it shines by itself, and it's the only thing there, there's total bittul mitzias. But when it shines to the Mesifta Derikia, the level of Memale, so then the level of Memale remains independent of it, because that level of a Kadosh Baruch Hu is a level that gives place for the existence of the worlds. It gives place for the existence of a level that is one of Havana and Hasaga. And so, even though it was shining, it didn't enter into their reality. In their reality, they were still seeing a place where there was the yeshus of the world. And even if there's bittul, it's only bittul of the yesh. Whereas Rabbi Bar Nachmani, who was Yachid bin Goyim, that's the key, the word Yachid, which means that he was on the level of Yachid, which isn't begeder almen klal. It has no connection to the worlds whatsoever. And that's why he was machriya, the opinion of the Mesivta Derikia. He was able to convince and bring in the Mesivta Derikia to experience things his way, so to speak, because since he was on a level of Yachid, he also brought that into the worlds. So even if the worlds didn't take it in fully in a way that it was within their reality, but this is similar to when Rav said a Psak Din. There's a story where Rav said a Psak Din, and when he was asked a question, he was quiet, he didn't have an answer, but he didn't retract his opinion. And some Rishonim rule like Rav. And the explanation is, it's like we say that a person sees something, he has a certain clarity in what they're seeing in their mind's eye, but they can't articulate it, they can't explain it. And it's the same thing here. When there's a revelation of Yachid, then the Mesivta Derikia, even if, so to speak, they can't articulate it and describe it in Havana, in Asaga, in understanding and grasping things, which is their way of being, but it sits with them in their mind that it's the correct thing, that that's the truth, even if they can't necessarily articulate it and express it. But even on their level, it's upgelegt, it's accepted in their reality as the truth. And that's why HaKadosh Baruch Hu said Tahar once, and Rabbi Bar Nachmani said Tahar twice. Because when HaKadosh Baruch Hu said Tahar, it was only the Taira from the level of the Lukus that's higher than the worlds. Whereas the Hachra of Rabbi Bar Nachmani was that also from the level of the worlds, it's also Tahar. And that's why he said Tahar twice. Because it's Tahar on the level of a Lukus that's higher than the worlds, and it's Tahar on the level of a Lukus that's connected to the worlds. And so now we can understand how it's possible for the Mesivta Derikia to argue with the Kodesh Baruch Hu, because there are two different levels, one of Memale and one of Seviv. And because Seviv is Seviv Kol Almin, so even when it shines and it's revealed to Memale, it doesn't negate the possibility for Memale to remain as it is. And that's how it's possible for the Mesivta Derikia to argue with the Kodesh Baruch Hu. And we also understand the logic to say that Rabbi Bar Nachmani should be machriya between them, included in that explaining how what he said is different than what HaKadosh Baruch Hu said, because he's a shlishi hamachriya, and how it's captured in the word yachid, because yachid represents that he's on a level of atzmusay muhusi yisbarach that's not begeder almin whatsoever. And that's why what he said is different than what HaKadosh Baruch Hu said, because HaKadosh Baruch Hu said Tahar only from a level of Elokus, which is higher than the worlds, whereas Rabbi Bar Nachmani said Tahar. Both it's Tahar on the level of Elokus that's higher than the worlds, and it's also Tahar on the level of Elokus that's connected to the worlds, because since he's on an entirely different level that's not Begeder Almin Klal, so therefore when it's revealed and it shines to the level of Memali, then even if Memali can't necessarily, so to speak, articulate it and fully grasp and understand it, but Memali accepts it and it resonates even on the level of Memali. Like we said, this din, that in a suffix, it's Tahar, so as we said, is learned from the pasuk that says, Latare Oy Latame, which is at the very end of our parsha. And according to the rule that no, it's soifan b'tchilasan, that the end is rooted in the beginning, so we can connect what we just learned to what's written in the beginning of our parsha, that Isha ki Tazria v'yolda zachar, from which Razal learn that Isha mazras tchilo yeleda zachar. So we see that there's a connection between the Isha mazras, that if it's from the Isha, and the yeleda zachar, that a zachar is born. And the explanation for the connection between the end and the beginning of the parasha is all gashmistic things, all physical things are mishtalshal, they evolve from the way it is, Baruch spiritually. And in our case, the reason there's an advantage to Isha Mazras Tchila, that specifically then is a Yeleda Zachar, which reflects an idea of permanence and strength, so that's because that's how it is by Ish and Isha Beruchnius. So the reason that's how it is down here by Gashmis is because that's how it is by Ish and Isha Beruchnius, which Ish and Isha Beruchnius are HaKadosh Baruch Hu is Ish, and the Yidden, which are Isha, meaning that there's an advantage in the Avodah of Yidden, of Isha Mazras Tchila, which is the Avodah of Yidden over the Amshachas Elikus from Isrusa de Leila, which is Ishmazriat Chila, that it comes from Hashem, which means Isrusa de Leila. And like Razal indeed say, G'doilim Ma'aseh Tzadikim Yoser Ma'aseh Shemayim V'Aretz, that the Ma'aseh Tzadikim of the Yidden is greater than the Ma'aseh Shemayim V'Aretz of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And this is the connection between the beginning of the Parsha and the end of the Parsha. According to the Halacha, that we don't pay attention to a baskel, and Torah loy b'shamayim hi, so we can't rule that it's Torah because HaKadosh Baruch Hu said it. And therefore, indeed, the Rambam rules that in the case that we discussed in the Sicha, it's Tameh. And in the Aris, the Rebbe talks about how that exactly fits with what we learned in the Sicha, that Rabbi Bar Nachmani says Tahar, and we should rule like Rabbi Bar Nachmani. At any rate, the point over here is not so much the ruling, but rather that according to halacha that we don't pay attention to a baskel, and Torah is loy b'shamayim hi, so we can't rule that it's Torah because HaKadosh Baruch Hu said it. That can't be the basis for it. And that's why they said, Neichach Rabbi Bar Nachmani. Who should decide? Who should determine the halacha? Rabbi Bar Nachmani, because the Torah was given down here. And so we see the advantage of the Isha Mazras Tchila, the Avodah of Yidden, of Rabbi Bar Nachmani, over the Ish Mazriya Tchila, the Isarusa Delayla from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that it goes by Rabbi Bar Nachmani and not by HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And so too, B'Pnimis Einyanim, the teaching of Rabbi Bar Nachmani is greater than the teaching of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And another point, which is in just like the greatness of Isha Mazras Tchila, is that Yeled Zachar, besides being greater, in what is it reflected that it's greater? That it's Yeled Zachar, that represents something which is strong, something which is permanent, that doesn't change. So similarly, when HaKadosh Baruch Hu said to her, it didn't negate an argument from the Mesifta Dirikia. It didn't have that strength. It didn't have that permanence, because there was still the opinion of the Mesifta Dirikia. And only when Rabbi Bar Nachmani said Tahar did it convince the Mesifta Dirikia. So we see over here both the idea of the advantage of the Avodah of a Yid, as well as the reflection of that advantage, that it's in the permanence and the strength of that opinion. And we see that over here, that it goes by Rabbi Bar Nachmani, and it's reflected in the fact that it was so strong that it convinced also the opinion of the Mesifta Dirikia, which shows on the strength of the opinion.